Good. It's good.
My name is VerWys. I'm director of something called Garden of Hope. And in the last few years, we've done various things. First of all, we planted an actual garden, and it was made for women that have had abortions. And so women can go when the sorrow overwhelms them and be alone with God in this beautiful garden with a beautiful artistic piece in the middle of it. We also go to the abortion clinic. For lack of a better word, we're called sidewalk counselors. And I guess we are on the sidewalk and we're counseling, that's about it. So we try to determine what their need is, and we try to meet it right there at that moment so that they don't have to go in the clinic and follow through with the abortion. There are three groups of women that just break my heart the most. The first one is the believers, and I call them announcing Christians. They might wear their Christian college sweatshirt. They might have on a bracelet that has the fish symbol in it. They might have a big Bible next to them in the car. Those women come with a whole set of things that has to get them that far. God forgives. God doesn't really care. As one woman said last week, all babies end up with Jesus anyway. I'm just sending this one early. And she's a Bible study leader in her church. The next group are what I call the moms already. Like they might have 2 car seats in the back. Kiss each child goodbye. And the dad takes off to babysit and they go in for the abortion. And then the third group that drives me a little wild are the wealthy. We see very middle and upper middle class. They do not want to be bothered. Gorgeous car, gorgeous clothes. They don't need help. What they need is for us not to mention what they're about to do. A couple of years ago, a young woman came, and the persons that were talking to her, the sidewalk counselors, she told them that she was 16 years old and that her mother was a pro-life Christian. She was homeschooled all her life. They were extremely close, but she came to our town and got a federal judge to give a waiver that she could have the abortion without her mother's knowledge, and that is lawful and legal. She was in the building 6 hours, and when she came out, she hobbled literally over to us and said, "I just want you to know there's good news." He gave me an ultrasound picture. It was a girl. She was sucking her thumb, and I named her Victoria. And she said, "I want to be a youth pastor. So in the fall, I'm going to go to Bible school. They wouldn't let me go pregnant, but now I'm going to be a youth leader." And within a week, she called us, and she was suicidal. I often wonder what brings a girl to that clinic. A girl might go in seemingly confident, probably abusive to us. And when she gets out, often, I've even had a young woman explain to me, it felt like her soul was sucked out. And when they return to their car, I've seen boyfriends have to scoop them up and put them in the vehicle like a rag doll and put the seatbelt over them. I have seen them throw up in the parking lot. I have seen them wail. They can, it's more than weeping. It's, "God, what have I done? That I cannot undo." They know instinctively, or by the very fiber that God has made them, image of God, what have I done? They cannot get over the fact that they, on purpose, paid a man to take their child's life, and that haunts them. I think if I could give one piece of advice, that your kids and grandkids know that no matter what, your love will never change. They're terrified to hurt your feelings. I always say to young women, if you're close to your mother, your grandma, they are going to know very soon, 25 seconds after you're in the front door of your house, they're gonna know something dreadful has happened to you, and they're gonna start asking. And then, if you finally break down and tell them, do you know what they're gonna think? They're gonna think, what kind of parent and grandma was I? Why didn't she come? I would have moved heaven and earth to help her. And now she's wounded for life. So be that kind of parent and grandparent. Uncomfortable discussion, yes. No, you don't want them sleeping around, but you really don't want them covering it up because of their great love for you. So let them know your love is there and it's solid.
I don't remember buying the pregnancy test, but I remember standing in my bathroom, looking at the instructions on the paper, and then looking at the test, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm a good Christian girl on birth control. I am not supposed to get caught in my sin. My boyfriend was sitting on the bed, and I looked at him and I said, I'm pregnant. And he just looked at me and he said, well, that's no problem. He said, we'll just take you to have an abortion. I've taken other girls before. And I thought, okay, he's gonna take care of it. We drove to Houston. He dropped me off on the curb and they told him to come back in 4 hours. I walked in alone and filled out a bunch of paperwork. I remember going into a group counseling session and she showed us a video. And I guess at the end of the video, we all looked a little scared and She started laughing and she said, "Don't worry, girls." She said, "I've had 9 abortions. You're gonna be fine." And that did make me feel a lot better because I thought, oh, I'm just doing this once. But I remember being in there and the nurse was in there and she was giving me conscious sedation, and I just remember it was excruciatingly painful, pain I'd never experienced before. The next thing I remember is waking up and all these girls I'd been in that counseling session with, they were all in this room with me and everybody was slumped over in their chairs. They gave me a little glass of tap water and a little package of 2 saltine crackers, and they sent me on my way. We drove home that day. We made the 1.5-hour drive back to College Station in silence, and we never spoke about it again. The main reason I wanted to have an abortion was because I did not want to disappoint my parents. I heard about those girls that had, pregnancies out of wedlock. I remember hearing about that. And to be perfectly honest, I wanted my parents to believe that I had held on to that promise that I would remain abstinent until marriage. I remember saying, "Oh, I'm still pro-life. I still think abortion is wrong, but this time it was me, and I had a special situation, and so this is why I had to have this abortion." I met the representative from Planned Parenthood on campus at my school. I tell people now that wherever there are vulnerable women, so is Planned Parenthood. So she started telling me about, all the services they provide and how they're just there to help these poor women who without them wouldn't have access to health care. And I was looking for a place to volunteer, and she told me that they certainly had volunteer opportunities and that they did do abortions and that their volunteer opportunities were primarily related to abortion services. But she told me that it was just a little tiny bit of what they did, only about 3%. It was sort of this necessary evil. I filled out an application that day, and my job was to walk the women from their cars up to the front door of the abortion clinic and to have conversation with them, to keep them away from the pro-lifers who are outside trying to give them information. Because we were so pro-choice, right? We were trying to block them from actually making a different choice. I had been at Planned Parenthood for 8 years in 2009 and was the director of the clinic. I loved my job, was getting awards, getting bonuses. I mean, I was at a good place inside of Planned Parenthood. In August of that year, I was meeting with my boss, and she told me that they were going to be doubling our quota for abortions, the number of abortions that we had to perform every month. And that, I didn't understand that, because our goal at Planned Parenthood was to reduce the number of abortions. So why in the world are you doubling our abortion quota? And so I said that out loud to my supervisor. And she started laughing at me, and she said, "Why would we want to reduce the number of abortions, Abby? That's how we make our money." Abortion was a product that we were selling to our customers. And we were doing it by offering free pregnancy tests. Come in here and get a free pregnancy test. And then when we tell you you're pregnant and you're scared and you're crying and you're alone and you're vulnerable, we're going to convince you that an abortion is the solution to your problem. We're going to package up abortion in this pretty little present, and you can unwrap it later. And unwrapping that present would mean a lifetime of guilt and regret and shame. But we weren't telling them that. We had this physician come in from out of town, and he was explaining that at his own private practice abortion clinic, he performed abortions a little differently. So he told me that if time presented and the right patient presented, that he would show me what this type of ultrasound guided abortion looked like. That time did come, and I was asked to come in and assist. So I'm in the room. My job is to hold the ultrasound probe on the woman's abdomen so that the doctor can see the baby during the abortion. We do a measurement. We find that the baby's 13 weeks along. Now, I knew what a baby at 13 weeks along looked like because I had already been pregnant with and had my daughter, Grace. I remember seeing just a full profile of the baby, and I immediately felt really apprehensive about what I was about to see. And I watched the instrument, the suction tube. The suction wasn't yet turned on. I watched that go into the woman's uterus. I could see it on the screen. And I watched it go right up next to the side of this little baby. And as soon as it touched his side, he jumped. And I saw these little arms and legs begin to flail, just moving so fast, trying to get away from that abortion instrument. But he was trapped. There was nowhere for him to go. And the suction was turned on, and I just remember seeing this baby become dismembered in his mother's womb, and just pieces being torn away one at a time. And the very last thing that I saw on the screen was this. It was bright white, just this perfectly formed little backbone. And I saw it just swirling around in the uterus, and eventually it was gone, and the screen was black. And I knew that meant that the uterus was empty and that the abortion was complete. I went home that day and I told my husband what I had seen. He just looked at me and he said, "What are you gonna do now? You've seen the truth. What are you gonna do?" So I called my parents. My parents were on vacation. I said, "Everything's fine. You just may want to pull over and put me on speakerphone." And so she said, "Okay." And she said, "Okay, we're here. What's up?" And I said, "I'm leaving Planned Parenthood today." And they both just like started screaming. They were just like, I could tell they were crying, they were screaming, they were laughing. It was so loud. And I just thought, they had been praying for 8 years. And, I tell parents, never give up on your kids. God promised us. We may not see it. We may be in heaven by the time it happens, but He promises us that if we raise our children in the faith, that if we raise our children to know Him, that they may depart, but they will eventually come back home to Him. And I wouldn't be here today without the power of praying parents. So I always tell parents, don't give up on your kids. Don't sever that relationship that you have with them, even if they've strayed, even if you just want to wring their necks. Don't give up on your kids, because one day they will return and they're going to need you to be that safe place to land.
So I've been a nurse since 1974, and I'm a nurse practitioner at the Pregnancy Resource Center. And I focus completely on sexually transmitted infections. STIs are also known as STDs. The words are interchangeable from my perspective, but STIs are sexually transmitted infections. They are infections that are transmitted exclusively sexually through any form of sex, and we would define that as oral sex, vaginal sex, or anal sex. So all of those are ways that infections can be transmitted. Some infections show up as skin abnormalities, so bumps in places where people don't want them. And so sometimes they show themselves superficially, sometimes you can see them, but the vast majority of the time STIs are invisible and one would have no way of knowing really what a sexual partner has. The ranges of physiologic response from the infections, for example, with chlamydia and gonorrhea, we know that as two bacterial infections, they are capable of infecting the pelvis or the abdomen. So, for example, the female pelvis can become infected, and that can result in infertility. For males, the infection can go up into the reproductive tract and cause infection, for example, of other organs like the epididymis and the testicles. For women who are pregnant, having chlamydia or gonorrhea or trichomonas can interfere with the process of pregnancy, and it can also interfere with the outcome of the birth, whether the pregnancy goes a full 40 weeks, sometimes they will deliver early. Babies can be born with the infections that their mother carries. Human papillomavirus is the most common of all the sexually transmitted infections, and it causes one of two things. Most of the families of HPV cause warts, and warts show up as physical bumps. The rest of the families of HPV can cause cancer. In women, this would be cancer of the cervix. This is why most females get pap smears starting at age 21. And we're starting to see just a subtle increase in cancer of the mouth and cancer of the rectum from people who are having oral sex and anal sex. The range of response to being told that you have an STI, for example, is quite significant. Some just don't seem to be, that bothered by it, at least at that surface level, but many are just extremely just shocked, actually. Very, very surprised. So most people do not think that it will happen to them. It's always somebody else who has an STD. Other people carry infections, not me, and not somebody that I've grown to love. So there's usually quite a bit of surprise. There's no way to prevent these infections in an absolute way. Condoms, at their very, very best, still offer only partial protection. So 80% in the case of HIV, that's the best that condoms can do. So everybody always has risk. You're always left with risk if that's all that you're depending on. And so the only real way to avoid not only the physical effects of an STI, but the emotional effects of an STI, and I would say even beyond that, the emotional disruption in a relationship is just to cultivate one that is, it's based on abstinence. And I would say maybe abstinence should be a part of that because of what sex does to relationships. And there's probably no happier teens and young people than those who really have come to the point of understanding what it looks like and what it feels like, just to say this is going to be our commitment to each other.
My name is Diana Riley, and I am the Medical Services Manager at the Pregnancy Resource Center. The questions we ask, in the STD clinic are just really to the point, some very deep personal questions. I might ask, what symptoms are you having? But then I'll also ask, what has your sex history been like? How many partners have you had? What types of sex do you have? Do you have sex with men and women? So in asking those questions, I just try to create a sense of peace just in my voice, and even just a sense of peace that they aren't being judged judged, that they aren't, that I'm not trying to impress my opinions upon them, but that I just want to hear from them. I just want to hear what their situation is. I want to hear what their issue is. Most often I find that people already feel ashamed and they already feel, like they shouldn't have slept with that many partners. There's a story that I can think of, a young lady who was excessively promiscuous, and she had just been diagnosed with herpes, and it was something that would never go away. Herpes is a viral infection that sticks with you for life. The outbreaks come and go, but the virus is always there, and she was very devastated by that. She had been kind of having the mindset that I can, be wildly promiscuous and this wouldn't happen to me. I would say most often when people are diagnosed with STDs and they're devastated, they did really believe that this would not happen to them. They really believed that the community of people they were having sex were not the type of people who would get STDs. And the youth that are growing up today, there is absolutely no censor. They're faced with so much, everything is sex all the time, and it's all around them, and they have easy access to it. It's probably more challenging for them to make a decision towards abstinence because they're just faced with it, every day. And even if the majority of youth are choosing abstinence, it's just not what's popular right now. So it doesn't sound good to say, I'm abstinent or I'm waiting until marriage, but the world is delivering messages to kids that abstinence is not cool, that going out and experimenting with your sexuality, that's what's in the media, that's what the cool thing is. So they go out and they do that, they experiment sexually, but then they contract STDs or maybe have unplanned pregnancies, and those things are not cool. So then they've lost twice.